Think Realty Nation, it's your host, Abhi Golhar. Welcome to the Think Realty podcast. I tried to do the reverb. Sometimes it doesn't work in post, but it clearly didn't work then. I'm excited for today's show. We're talking all things self-directed IRAs and 401ks and SEPs and SEPs and whatever's on your mind regarding self-directed. A self-directed account is one of the most powerful ways to build wealth, but you have to follow the rules. We have a foremost expert with us today, Jason from NuView, who understands the world of self-directed IRAs. And I've got a couple of very interesting questions for him for first-time investors and then, of course, seasoned investors that have yet to use a self-directed Roth IRA specifically to invest in real estate or lend money through. So that's what's coming up. Before we get there, huge shout out to Real Property Management, who's the sponsor of today's podcast. Working with the right property management company can put more money in your pocket and not less. RealPropertyMGT.com provides a higher standard of property management to ensure you're maximizing the return on your investments. You want to experience the real difference with Real Property Management. Jason, dude, welcome to the show. It's been a while, my friend. How are things in the self-directed land?
Hey, Abhi, good to see you, man. It's been, been a little bit too long. Things are good. It's, I think as we look in our world and our crystal ball, we see the world of self-directed investing continue to get bigger, even as some uncertainty hits the market. It can drive some of the investors maybe, to the sidelines, but it causes a lot of good long-term investors to start running in full steam. And so we're excited to see that.
Excellent. I remember about a year and a half ago, there was a lot of legislation that was being considered to change the rules for self-directed accounts and possibly even harm those investors that had self-directed accounts and specifically Roths and IRAs and 401ks and 403bs, et cetera. Could you talk to what happened as a result of that? And do we have anything to fear as it relates to potential government rules and regulation changes around self-directed accounts?
Well, the government can do anything. And when I say the government, right, you've got the Senate and Congress and the House and all of these different bodies that create legislation. But thankfully, we live in a society whereby usually, it's got to pass through enough different sets of hands where hopefully cooler heads prevail. So, a few years back, we had some legislation. There's a variety of things that have come out. But I kind of refer to it as the Peter Thiel, legislation. If for those that aren't familiar, Peter Thiel's a co-founder of PayPal. And he has announced or somehow became public that he had over $1 billion in a Roth IRA. And everybody kind of lost their mind and said, well, how's that even possible? And it was ultimately, he had bought a lot of a very low valued stock at the time, which then became a unicorn, which, is known as PayPal and some others. And as a result, there was some legislators that said, we've got to put a stop to this. And so they put a lot of legislation around a couple key areas. One was capping Roths, eliminating Roths, putting income restrictions on Roths. The other was around private investments. They said an IRA cannot own a private investment, right? They didn't specifically name real estate or lending. They named private equity. And as a result, there was a lot of uproar, and as you can imagine, rightfully so. Thankfully, that didn't last very long. It was not only was it squashed, we've only seen it actually go in the complete opposite direction since then. For those that are familiar with the Secure and Secure 2.0, they've not only increased Roths, they've added Roth components to simple IRAs and SEPs, which historically did not have a Roth component. There is no income restriction. There still are full conversion rules, and now they're allowing you to contribute higher dollar amounts into these additional types of accounts beyond the Roth with after-tax money. So, to suggest that it won't rear its head again, who knows? But I love when you see legislation that doesn't just disappear, but within a year or two later, you see the opposite-ended legislation that passes with flying colors. I think it gives an idea of where we're headed, and I'll just close this out with this. if you think about the government, while they don't like the Peter Thiel success stories of all this tax-free growth, when push comes to shove, they look at the Roth IRA and realize that's tax revenue into the Treasury today. And so as much as they want to fight it, they love the Roth, like it or not.
I didn't think about it like that before. That's interesting to me. Because the Roth IRA, you're paying taxes today for tax-free growth forever. So, of course, they're going to like it. They have no choice but to absolutely love it. Man, I love the United States of America.
Something that I learned that was kind of interesting, and I didn't know this, is that the way that budgets work, in Congress and the government, is it's a 10-year window, not 10 years and a day. So, when they look at some of these deferral programs that are out there, all that's doing is putting money off budget that they can't take any credit for. So it's why you're seeing a lot of this Roth stuff being so excitable to them, is because if they remove it and eliminate it, and money moves into traditionals, anything that's 10 years out can't even show up on their budget. So it's a little bit of just kind of the way that they track budgets, and it works very well in our favor, and it's proven to only be more accessible, not less accessible as a result.
I know there are a lot of real estate investors that are thinking about opening a self-directed account, and maybe they just haven't had a chance to do that. Maybe they're too busy flipping a house. Maybe they're too busy watching people on TV flip a house. We don't know. Or getting inspired by those that do. If there's one account that you would recommend opening as a real estate professional, what would it be and why? And I'm interested to see your thoughts on this. And if you're wrong, we should battle it out.
All right. Well, I got a feeling our visions will be the same here.
I think so.
There's with the just at least caveat that every situation is a little bit different. But speaking in general terms, a self-employed real estate investor, the best plan, hands down, for a variety of reasons, which I'm happy to elaborate better on, is the individual 401k, solo QRP. Goes by a bunch of different names, but it's an owner-only 401k plan that gives the self-employed real estate investor both an employee deferral, a profit-sharing employer deferral. It's got the Roth contributions. It's got no UDFI or UBIT tax. It's got loan provisions. And it also, by the way, comes with the highest amount of contribution limit against any other plan, with the shortest amount of income required. So it's all around just a fantastic plan. And it's not real estate investors alone. Anyone self-employed without employees should be considering that plan over anything else.
I couldn't agree more. My initial gut reaction when thinking about this type of strategy and how it generally fits into a wheelhouse would be that 401k, possibly even a Roth, depending on what I wanted to do with the Roth. And again, there are like a lot of rules and regs, and I'm not a financial advisor, so make sure that you get in touch with Jason and his team so you can figure out the best strategy for what you're looking to do. And this is something that you should, the viewer of Think Realty Nation, you need to be taking very seriously. If you can avoid paying as much in tax as you can, you should. And this is a program, this is what the government created so you can take control of your retirement and not have to wait around for somebody else to do that for you. And if you're a self-employed individual, this absolutely, I don't know if I can think of a better word, but it weaponizes and supercharges, if you will, your financial future and potential earnings inside of your retirement accounts. And if you're not doing that, you really pay attention to it. If you're the kind of individual that wants to flip, and you're constantly paying the capital gains tax on every single flip, you're losing the game here, everybody. So make sure you get in touch with Jason and his team over at NuViewTrust.com. Jason, what is the number one, not mistake, but the number one rule that is violated inside of a self-directed ecosystem that you see the most, and then you turn around and tell the individual that violated this rule, how I told you so, and you should have paid more attention?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's only a few rules to follow, so there's not a lot of different rules to break. But the rules really break down in two components, right? You have one component is you can't buy life insurance, you can't buy collectibles. That's not really what we see very, very few times. Occasionally, we'll get the question of, can I buy something that's deemed or considered a collectible? Really the second rule, and this is to answer your question, the one that's most often at least attempted to be violated or likely violated, is the prohibited transaction around arm's length transactions. So, if you think about your IRA, it's a tax advantage tool. It's either tax-free forever or it's tax deferred. Either way, both of those types of accounts represent major opportunity against your personal money. What people automatically think is that if they can self-direct their retirement account, they now can control it into their personal account. And if you kind of think about that, if you have an account at Schwab, you can self-direct it, you can pick your own investments, but you got to buy stocks and bonds. No personal benefit, no tangible benefit, and everyone's okay with that. Yet when they get to a self-directed IRA through someone like NuView, their first thought is, how do I get my money, into my hands, or how do I get as much money into this Roth as possible, which I love strategizing with, but the IRS is very clear. If the deal is not arm's length, and meaning it's fair market values amongst people where the relationship isn't impacting the terms, and they list some people you cannot do business with, your parents, your grandparents, your children and grandchildren, and the spouses and businesses. As long as you steer clear of those folks, you're fine. But what ends up happening, and I get questions like this, is, I want to go do this deal for $50 and I'm going to make 50 million. Can I do that? And my first question is, how are you tied into that investment? Well, it's my dad, it's my, this, it's my that. And so my general question is, if I made the investment, would I get the similar or same terms? If the answer is yes, then you're probably arm's length and doing okay. If the answer is no, then you probably ought to reevaluate that deal, because the very reason you want to do it is probably the very reason the IRS is looking to penalize you for it.
That's fair enough. Arm's length transactions, if you don't know what those are, pay attention, rewind, and just listen to that again. And also, again, get in touch with the team, Jason's team over at NuView. You have to understand this major component of the rule that you shouldn't be violating. Big problem. What type of assets can I own inside of a self-directed account? Can I like gold? What can I put in there? It seems like this kind of black box that's in the ether, floating around outer space, which is also void of all color and all things. So it's just like, what do I do? How do I get it in there?
Yeah, I mean, you got the mechanics of it. I think from just a practical standpoint, to answer the question of what can you do, I mean, really anything but life insurance and collectibles, so long as it's arm's length. Now, it's not necessarily that black and white, but in reality it is. Our clients break down really into four categories. The first category is real estate, and that's real estate of all types. This is where we would consider anything like raw land, rental property, single family homes, anything that had a deeded title to real property. The second category is private notes. These can be secured, unsecured. This can be convertible debt, business debt, bridge financing. Really anything that has, some sort of interest rate and a maturity date typically falls into the category of notes. The third one is private equity. Private equity is any sort of private entity in which you're buying some sort of equity stake in. So this we see a lot in partnerships. We see a lot in LLCs and C corporations. Any of these private equity deals can be businesses. They could be real estate based. It could be lending based. But we call them private equity because the end result from an IRA investment standpoint is you're buying the equity of a private enterprise. The fourth is kind of that catch-all other. This is where cryptos would fall. This is where precious metals would fall. Tax liens, tax certificates, those would fall in here, those being some of the more common things that we see. We see a lot of joint ventures and a lot of kind of one-off agreements for one-off deals that fall into that other category. But that's kind of the core four, if you will. That represents probably 95% of the assets that we hold within our client portfolio.
Can you quickly touch base on a checkbook IRA and whether or not that is truly effective for handling self-directed funds?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I would say checkbook control IRAs is something that When it makes sense, it's a great tool. And when it doesn't make sense, it's not worth the setup and structure. So it's just something that you want to look at. I think sometimes people think it's one or the other. The way an IRA works is the IRA is directed through a custodian. That's how every self-directed IRA works from start to finish. What you have is you have an IRA and you direct, in this case, NuView, to go buy a property or to go buy a private equity. What a checkbook IRA, and it's really a checkbook LLC tied to an IRA, does, it says, I'm going to direct my custodian to buy 100% of the shares of an LLC that I just established for that IRA, which is perfectly permissible as long as you're following all the rules around arm's length. Once that occurs, any subsequent investments are no longer directed through the custodian. You're able to go buy them directly through the LLC. Pros and cons. Pros are that now, right, if you have a couple $100,000 in your IRA that you've now bought the equity of this LLC with, that LLC could go buy 2 or 3 properties. It could buy rental properties, and you can have a little bit more, when I say a little bit more hands-on, you can have a little bit more control being at the LLC versus having to go through the directed portion of the custodian. That's a pro. Another pro is that you've got quicker access to money. You've got the ability to have a little bit more oversight. So those are all pros. Additional pros are you only pay the custodian for one asset. So for us, if you do that, you pay us for one asset, and all the subsequent assets, because they're bought by the LLC and don't cross our books, obviously we don't charge you a fee for that. The cons, if you will, is you're doing the work. So this is something that I liken this to mowing your own grass. You can't say that you saved money by mowing your grass. You just traded your labor for the cost that it would cost you to mow the grass. But at the end of the day, you got to get out there and mow it. Just because you're paying us less money, which is fine, doesn't mean that you're not taking on more work and responsibility, i.e. mowing the grass. So I wouldn't do it to save a few $100. If you're that penny foolish around how you save money, you're giving up way too much of your actual time at the expense. So a good investor would rather have the hours of time back, not the couple $100 in administrative fees. But I digress on that piece of it. The other piece is that a lot of people think it's a great way to save fees. Well, what they don't realize is they also have to pay LLC filing fees, and in states like California, that can be $800+. Yeah. So it's not always a fee-centric. So if people tell me they're doing it for fees, I tell them we just may not be the right custodian for you, because we want to be the best and we want you to do business with the best. But if you are looking for more control, more flexibility, the ability to have that direct oversight of the money, I think an LLC is a great tool. My typical rule of thumb, if people ask me my opinion, is I wouldn't do it until I was going to buy at least 2 or 3 individual assets that did require some attention. I've seen some people that have set up an LLC and made one passive investment into a partnership that had no moving parts, absolutely no reason to do it, and it probably cost them more in fees and energy for something that was dormant. So, just be mindful of what you're doing. Great strategy, great tool when the situation arises, but it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Jason, the problem with what you just said is I like the smell of cutting my own grass holding an $8 iced latte from Starbucks. So people like you no, just kidding. I was going to say, you frustrate me because you don't let me mow my own lawn. No, but to your point, there's a lot of this compliance and what am I doing wasting my time sitting here filling out paperwork and where I should be instead looking for opportunity. So nonetheless, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jason. I certainly appreciate it. Think Realty Nation, you want to get in touch with Jason and his team at NuView Trust, do it at NuViewTrust.com. Again, Jason, we'll have you back. We need to continue to talk through any changes that are happening in this industry to make our listeners and viewers aware of how they should change their strategies accordingly. So certainly appreciate you coming on.
Hey, have a good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you got it. If you got questions for us or any member of the Think Realty team, certainly get in touch on thinkrealty.com, or you can find me anywhere online at Abhi Golhar. Until next time, happy investing.